jail-free card on taxes, and then had S&P basically hand down a dictum that says he has more power to dictate terms and conditions and can charge a higher profit on lending money to the United States government, municipalities, and consumers. So, he doesn't have to pay any more taxes, but he gets to charge more money in the process of lending back to us the money he got gifted to him on the bailouts. It's quite neat. So I don't. Why should Mr. Global confiscate a little bit of gold? When the people. Anyway, so my example here is, if you talk to, I was just out in San Francisco for a couple months, and if you talk to people out there, they're furious because they think that truly this came from the right wing and all these grassroots and nuts in the South. They don't sort of understand it didn't come from there. It came from Mr. Global. So he's done a very good job of getting people to believe that the grassroots is insisting on those stuff, when in fact it's much more engineered for his benefit and by him. It's going to be the same with the gold. I mean, I think you're seeing a lot of people push for gold currencies and sound currency and gold this and that. And in fact, it's going to work exactly to his advantages and to where he wants to go. So I think it's part of where this thing is now. Here's the problem. The problem we're watching a centralization of the economy that's fundamentally lawless and does not respect the rights, including the property rights of the average person. And in that scenario, anything can and will be confiscated, and economic values are harmed because the leverage in a financial system, the multiple of the stock depends on a belief in the rule of law. As soon as the rule of law goes away, Whole Foods doesn't trade at 34 to 1 or a multiple of 34. They trade at a multiple of 1. So when things are lawless, anything can be confiscated, and the danger is, that he does not want you and me to have property rights, at which point, everything gets confiscated. At one point, Chris Pallet-Gatta wrote, the Gold Antitrust Action Committee wrote a letter to Treasury and said, do you preserve the right and power to confiscate gold? And they wrote back a letter. It's up on the Gatta website, and they said, we reserve the right to confiscate everything.
Jeez. Oh.
Right. So all I'm saying is, we're sitting in a world where they're in the process of confiscating your mind, your body, your health. They're debasing your currency. They're debasing the quality of all sorts of products and services. They're debasing your time. Could confiscation of precious metals happen? Yes, but if you look at the whole panoply of what's being confiscated, you need to see it in context of that. And what's important is to protect yourself against all of those confiscations, not just gold and silver.
Very good. Okay. Well, now, my other question was regarding silver and the 15-to-1 ratio, but you pretty much answered that. But if you had to be pinned down to making a prognostication, do you think that'll happen this year, next year, or the year after, given that Mr. Global can do it any time that he wants? If you had to make a guess, what would it be?
I really don't know, because I think part of it is I think that Mr. Global knows where he wants to go, but it's emergent how it's going there. There are two possibilities. Tina Turner said we can do this nice or rough, and one way to do it is to keep sort of doing the slow burn for a couple more years, say between now and 2015, 2020. The other is to do what's called a radical debasement, which is the way you deal with the global debt problem is you go to bed, tonight, and gold's at 1680, and you wake up tomorrow morning and gold's at 5,000, and you've just dealt with the debt problem. So you can do it fast or slow. If you do the slow burn, the value of gold depends on how much money you print. So it really has more to do with the printing press of the fiat currencies than it does to gold, because we're quoting prices not in gallons of gasoline, but in dollars of something that's being, that's in a state of QE perpetual. So there's really no way to know which one it's going to be. And I think, I tend to think it's going to be slow burn because what they're looking to do is rebalance the global economy and bring up the emerging markets in a way that offsets the aging populations in Europe and the United States. And so, to me, it's more logical that they'll continue to slow burn the thing. But, and that sort of fits in with the global population who gets up every day and makes their money and livelihood by keeping things working. So there's enormous alignment that way. So I think the slow burn is more likely, and so that means the ratio, it could take many years.
Okay. Well, great. I appreciate the answer. We're now going to move on to the next subject, which is the powers that be, and Green Meadow is going to fire a question at you.
Okay.
Hi, Catherine. I keep feeling like the powers that be, or Mr. Global, is his own worst enemy. Like once the banks started having problems when they stopped trusting each other. Can the powers that be survive if they stop trusting each other? How do you think they are their own worst enemy?
Well, here's the $64,000 question, and that is, who's really in control? Mm-hmm. And this comes down, we know there's very advanced technology flying spaceships around the planet. And the question is, are those people from Earth or are those people from someplace else? And, and I don't begin to know the answer to that question, but I think that's the most important question that we don't know the answer to. And depending on, how you answer that, then very different things fall out. Because if we're talking about, somebody who has, the ability to force, who has superior military technology, who literally thinks of themselves as a different species and who is looking to extract subsidy from an entire planet, it's a very different situation than if we just have a group of humans who's kind of gone off and come up with a psychotic plan to rule the world. And, and so the question is, which is it? And you get very, very different scenarios depending on your assumptions to that answer. Now, let's just assume it's a group of humans who've gone off and come up with a plan to centralize. There's a lot that can happen as the system centralizes to force them to, start to compete. And I think if you look at what it takes, whether you're running an enterprise, whether you're running a government, whether you're running a family, any organization or group, generally to get things done over a long period of time and to run things productively, people have to share goals and they have to share principles, and those principles have to have a higher purpose than just what's in it for me. And when you don't have those higher goals and those higher principles, you tend to fall into lawlessness, and that's when things like what I call the Midianite thing happen. And I think as I watch what's happening, if this is a group of humans, I don't think the New World Order can hold it together with the kind of goals and values and principles that they currently share. I think as long as you're engineering things covertly, it can work. When you have to come out of the closet, I think it falls apart, particularly when things are this centralized. Now, I say that if, in fact, the people in control are off-planet, that's a whole different kettle of fish. And, and I hate to say this, just, there are too many uncertainties in that scenario. So, I would throw it out to you guys. Which one is it?
That's a great question. Yeah, I guess it's just I keep feeling like the powers that be are going to in some way take themselves down.
Here's the thing to remember. Let me speak on behalf of Mr. Global. One of the, we all tend to think that the corruption is at the top. And I have to tell you, I've spent time in my life at the top, at the bottom, in the middle. I've had a very interesting series of experiences that had me sort of, at every level in many different parts of the world and many different constituencies. And what I have to tell you is everybody's a prisoner of the system, and oftentimes Mr. Global is, because the problem is if you have a population in which people are easily tricked and will sell each other out for pennies, the problem is if you run things ethically, then the guy who doesn't will win and use his money and success, including his support of the crowd, to kill you. And so Mr. Global is also a prisoner of the greed and sort of corruption at the bottom too. So it's a chicken and egg dilemma, and part of the challenge for Mr. Global is how do I get out of the trap? I mean, my personal experience has been that the crowd supports the guy who wins. So I'll give you an example. I'm a Christian, and I was at a revival for Christian women that T.D. Jakes does called Women Thou Art Loosed in the summer of 2000, and I was standing with my minister. The minister was teaching me in my church's Bible class, and she used to work at the DEA, and there's nothing about government drug trafficking and, sort of drug trafficking by prominent Americans that she doesn't know. And George W. Bush came in on monitor, and the whole crowd, 100,000 African-American women, jumped up cheering for him. So afterwards I said to her, Patricia, I just lost, millions of dollars in cash and probably a couple $100 million in equity and many years of my life and risked my life to try and stop narcotics trafficking and related financial fraud by the Bushes and the Clintons. And you jumped up cheering for Bush. And she said, well, he's going to be the winner. And I said, so he's the winner and I'm a loser. And she said, yeah, that's right.
Wow.
Now, well, but I could tell you hundreds of stories like that. And if you go back and you look at the story of crucifixion, which is a very, whether you think it's true or not, it's a very important part of our mythology, which is, that Pontius, the Jews, the priests wanted Jesus crucified, but Pontius Pilate and the Romans knew that was very bad politics. So they offered the crowd a criminal or Jesus and said to the crowd, which do you want killed? And the crowd chose the criminal to be freed. Now, that's traditionally what Mr. Global has been taught his whole life, is the crowd will support the criminal. The crowd will never support the guy who's financially responsible. And I have to tell you, I've been a government official and then a government contractor who tried to create a constituency for financial responsibility. I have yet to see one, indication that it exists. Now, I continue to promote it because I don't want to be a part of genocide. So I'd rather sit in the wilderness and promote financial responsibility than, make money on genocide. But what I will tell you is I have yet to see very, much indication. I mean, make no mistake about it, the housing bubble in America was not engineered by Mr. Global. The housing bubble was engineered by thousands and thousands of mortgage brokers, home builders, and appraisers in county after county and community after community who knew perfectly well this was destroying their county.
So as much as we're dealing with them, they're dealing with us.